I've noticed that every time I write something down, one of my ideas into my book, into my journal, I kind of lose the impulse to make a video about it, or rather said, to talk about it, because it's kind of like a finished business as soon as I write it down, because then I know it, okay, I won't forget it. So I'm just gonna use that to start off this video. Welcome. Hey, this may be the first time that you hear me talking English, since this is usually a German channel where I do videos in German. I also did one video before in English, but yeah. I'm just gonna see what works the best. Before on this channel, I've talked a lot about the Ukraine war, basically how it's not as bad as it seems, how the public has a whole different perception than the people at NATO themselves have from this war, or even from the relations between the US and the EU. First of all, I want to say Trump, it's not like Trump is in a position to decide whether he needs the NATO or not. It's the other way around. Let me explain why. The NATO basically is, in history, has always been kind of just as important for the US as it has been for Europe. Depends on the times, but especially now it's that the US wants to set its focus on China. And to fight off China, the US would be maybe capable of doing that, but the best way would be to have allies. And especially not have your own allies being busy by a proxy war or even by a junior partner from China, causing this distraction and weakening the Western militaries over time, just to then maybe invade Taiwan when the US is weak, because the US have exhausted their resources. The EU is currently trying their best already to just keep Ukraine from losing, even though at this point Ukraine is very well capable of winning this war on its own. Ukraine produces basically all of its own drones that it uses, and drones are like the most important technology in modern wars. 70% of the casualties come from drone kills. So drones are very essential. Russia has been doing a lot of harm, especially to the Ukrainian civilians and even its own civilians, by shooting off drones made in Iran. Currently they're making them themselves because Iran sold the license to Russia to produce their own Shahed drones. Those drones were quite annoying because they were so cheap for Russia to produce and send off, and the air defense to take down those Shahed drones was way, way, way more expensive. And so in that kind, Ukraine would have lost the war if they hadn't found a solution. By the way, they have found a solution just recently in this year. They have developed a sentry turret, which basically rotates around and uses machine gun to shoot off special kind of machine gun that's basically as strong as a sniper rifle, just that it's shooting fully automatic, and it's used by an AI completely autonomous. So the AI doesn't need, like it's with the Western weapons, for example, we have big ships have their own sentries where they can also target with AI the targets and shoot them down, but there an US soldier needs to first of all search for a target, so make the AI first of all lock onto a target, then confirm the target, whether it's fine to attack this target or whether the orders are given, and then do the third step of actually giving fire. This whole process can be sustainable if you have permanent targets flying into your region that you want to defend. In Ukraine, those sentry turrets do it by themselves. They just find targets by themselves, are very good. I mean, it's like machine learning, picture recognition AI, how those drones look, so they don't shoot down their own planes. The sentry turret uses a full range spectrograph. It has a camera that doesn't only see visible light frequencies, but infrared and ultraviolet and radio frequencies. So it has a lot of data points to distinguish between targets. It's unlikely, I think, that the sentry turret will start killing people, like going rogue and shooting off their own soldiers. I don't think that. The other solution are lasers for targets that are higher than 1.5 kilometers into the air, because the sentry gun can shoot up to 1.5 kilometers and in up to 2.5 kilometers if it's farther down and not just up horizontally. But for the targets that are further away, they're using laser. I think you have seen maybe how those lasers look. It's quite cool looking and looking like science fiction, but basically a laser which aims at a target and burns through it. And it's funny because the laser can't be too powerful. If it's way more powerful, then it will instead start to hit the air molecules before the target, and then needs a lot of more energy until it can pierce through that itself, because it creates plasma and the plasma reflects the laser light. So it's kind of quite cool how those lasers work in general. So now that Ukraine has found this way of defending against cheap drones and even drone swarms, because the sentry gun can fire fully automatically and take aim while it fires. It doesn't have to stop and take time to rotate. It doesn't need a human who rotates it. It can rotate in every direction. A human only needs to refill the reload magazines once in a while. Alright, so now that Ukraine has found a way to defend in this war of attrition, Ukraine has found a way to not lose this war of attrition over time by having to use way more expensive air defense to shut down way cheaper munitions from Russia. Ukraine is very capable of doing intelligence operations, as we have seen with Operation Spiderweb. This wasn't just a game changer, it's also something I talked in my German views about, but it wasn't just a game changer in regards to Ukraine successfully killing or destroying a lot of expensive bombers that Russia can rebuild anymore because they are from the Soviet era. And by the way, Ukraine was making them. A lot of Soviet weapons were made in Ukraine. Ukraine was the weaponsmith country of the Soviet Union, and basically there were all the mines and the infrastructure combined to produce the rocket technologies and military technologies that the Soviet is known for. That's also a reason why Putin wants to take Ukraine back, because he knows he can only modernize his military if he gets Ukraine back. Period. Russia is, by its nature, like by its historic nature from the Soviet Union up to today, is by essence an imperialistic nation that tries to occupy new territory continuously to keep its economy going, because the society isn't really free. It's not really a good environment to produce a lot of innovation, and this means that Russia, and also by the way China, if it were like especially in the past, because as more restrictive and authoritarian state is, the less innovation basically happens. That's the benefit of Western societies, that we found out, okay, our way of living, our ideology also is the most economically fruitful. So Russia needs to keep occupying land. Obviously, we can allow that, and now that Russia is basically they took Crimea into like 8 years ago before the war started. No, it's already 11 years ago. That's why Russia was basically before decision. Either they change their way of society, their government, or they try to go back to old ways and occupy even more land because Crimea wasn't enough. Well, Putin chose the latter, especially because he himself doesn't want to lose power, and even if he were to die or lose power, someone else would replace him in a Kremlin. So the problem is not really Putin itself, but the whole government, how structural government of Russia, because it's quite similar, if not the same, from the Soviet Union. The only thing that really changed was that the ideology of communism went away. But that wasn't really what was the key essence of how Russia or the Soviet Union worked back then. So it's basically stayed as it was. And don't forget, it was the same country where Stalin, as I would say, the Soviet Union I'm talking about is the one that started like between Lenin and Stalin. Stalin was the guy who was at first friends with Hitler, wanted to invade Poland together with him, and basically only fell apart because Hitler was even more insane, or not even at that point, until Stalin himself became even more insane and killed even more people indirectly. So it kind of maybe apparent why I'm so pro-Ukraine, or in general like to talk about this war, because it's something that I'm kind of happy that I'm not happy that Ukraine war started. It was quite a shock, and that was the moment that started for me this whole journey of following the Ukraine war day for day at around like 1 to 2 hours spent every day. It's a hardly topic for me. Just decided I might start off here. I kind of don't know how to produce videos in English if I'm not gonna re-summarize what I've been talking about before on this channel. And maybe, I still hold true to these points. It's not like I say things and change my opinion the next week. If I do, then I might give you a video why I changed my opinion. Example would be like the mineral deal, the rare earth mineral deal, where I believed actually, okay, Trump wants $500 billion in like debt back from Ukraine by giving them support, and the mineral deal was like originally planned like that. It would be kind of impossible if Ukraine paid back with rare earth, because the global rare earth market doesn't exceed, or is around $10 billion a year currently. For example, even if people talk about how China's powerful because they control so much, such a big share of the rare earth production in the world, they think that they could cut it off and we would have no alternative. Thankfully, there's Australia. rare earth minerals aren't really rare. They are kind of everywhere. China can get them in en masse because they don't care about the environment and just put out the toxic radioactive waste material back into the environment. Australia does it way more ecologically. So they can also get rare earth minerals and they can scale it up. They have like the built infrastructure built because back then China stopped their exports to Japan and it was kind of like a shock, which thankfully awakened the Australians to improve. And also in the US, I believe it was Carolina. Somewhere in the US, they also get their own rare earth. Depends. If you really needed it because China fell out, you can scale up your own production quite reasonably fast. So it's not really possible to pay $500 billion in rare earth minerals. Maybe it fund thinks about the decade or the next 100 years, but it's insane. But that's what was something where I talked a lot about how important this deal is, how rare, and that Ukraine has this valuable assets. Not really, Ukraine isn't really that big of a deposit. It's kind of so that's something where I went back and made a video about it because I think like the change of heart is also interesting. Why? And yeah, I think that may be a good point to end this video. I'm glad that you tuned in. Have a nice remaining week, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Ciao, ciao.